What's up guys, Jeff here with JTS, and today I'm going to answer a common question that I get about shoes. Now, a lot of people when they first start training, they ask what the best type of shoe is. Then from there, prolonged periods of training will change shoe styles. I oftentimes see people wearing the wrong shoes for the wrong activity, as well as just kind of answering the question of what should you be looking for in shoes based on your training. So, first I want to cover 4 different spectrums of shoes. Your first one is going to be casual shoes. So that's going to be something like Converse, Chuck Taylors, a regular shoe like Puma, just something that you normally just walk around in, hang out in. That's a casual shoe, that's one. From there you have running shoes. Running shoes are typically, Asics, Innovates, Nikes, Reebok, stuff like that, which have more cushion in them. They're designed specifically for running and to cushion the heel of your shoe to allow you to have a little bit more cushion for each step you take. From there you have training shoes. Training shoes again are very similar classes, but Nikes, Reebok, stuff like that. Training shoes are going to be a little bit stiffer. They're going to give you a little bit more support and give you a little bit more even flat-footedness from the shoe itself. So it's going to give you a lower profile, give you a little bit more stability, and get you closer to the ground. I've got a couple that I'm going to show. And then from there, you've got Olympic training shoes or powerlifting shoes, which are a heel elevated shoe that elevates the heel a little bit off the ground while still giving you a nice solid platform, a little bit more sturdy of a shoe overall, which is built for powerlifting and Olympic lifting to change the angle of the ankle, okay? So I've got 3 shoes with me right now. First one I'm going to cover is the Olympic lifting shoe or powerlifting shoe. This is a Reebok, I don't even remember the name, but it's the Reebok Olympic lifting shoe. This shoe here, if you can see the gray part in the back, is the heel elevated portion, while your forefoot is closer to the floor. The benefit of wearing a shoe like this when training is going to be that when you're doing Olympic lifting, powerlifting, or anything like that, it's going to give you a little bit more of a forward toe base so you can have a better heel pressure pressing down. Okay, it's mainly intended for powerlifting or Olympic lifting, and typically you're only going to be wearing these when you're squatting or deadlifting. Okay, so that's the main use for Olympic lifting, these kind of shoes. Also, any sort of Olympic lifting, snatching cleans, anything like that, but mainly any lower body dominant performance is when you're going to be wearing Olympic lifting shoes, okay? Most people do not necessarily need these unless you're doing a lot of lower body dominant training, powerlifting, or Olympic lifting, all right? From there, we have a normal training shoe. So this is actually the Nike Metcon 2. I just got these so they actually look clean compared to my other shoes. But the Nike Metcon 2 or any training dominant shoe is going to have a more even heel to toe elevation. So if we actually look at these closely, the heel and toe elevation is very, very similar, which means that they are very flat shoe overall. They also have a good amount of support left to right. The inside of the shoe is not overly padded, as well as the heel is not overly padded. So if you're performing any movements, you feel closer to the ground, you feel more supported, and you actually engage the feet. So I'm going to cover that in a minute as well. So most of the time when you're doing training purposes, athletic training in general, and anything under about 5 miles, I would say, you can get away with wearing a training specific shoe, okay? And it's going to give you the most support and comfort for what you're trying to do, okay? From there, this is not specifically a running shoe, but this is a Nike Drkowski. This is just what I found in my car. This is a skateboard shoe. However, it's built very similar to a running shoe in that in this shoe, you can see how much the heel is lifted compared to the toe. So if we look at that compared to the other shoe, you can see the difference. Even though this is white, this whole bottom piece is really just flat, okay? Now this is very similar to the Olympic lifting shoe or the powerlifting shoe in that it has a raised heel and lower forefoot. However, this shoe is not going to be as optimal for training. The reason for this is because the heel itself, if you guys can see, it's got this little air pocket. This shoe itself is actually going to squish down as you guys do movements. So if you're doing a heavy squat or heavy deadlift or anything like that, the heel itself is going to start to squish down. So that's closing the gap but not giving you any stability. The other thing about this is typically this shoe or a running shoe is going to have a more higher arch in the middle, which raises your foot. Okay? By using a shoe like that, you have now elevated the heel, so it puts you into this flex position, and it also is taking your foot away from the ground, so it's not activating the feet and ankles as much. So it's actually supporting it, very similar to like how a cast would work on your arm. Now, the next level of shoe would be something like a Converse. That's just a normal walking or daily activity shoe. Okay, so when it comes to training overall, the two types of shoes I recommend is going to be the first and the third. So it's going to be a training specific shoe or a regular everyday flat soled shoe like a Converse, Chuck Taylor, something like that. The reason for that is because these kind of shoes give you less overall arch build into the shoe, so you have a flatter foot. You also are closer to the ground, so that means your feet are actively working throughout your training session instead of being supported like a cast in a running shoe. The other reason is because if you're doing anything under about 5 miles, you can get away with wearing a skateboard shoe, a Converse, even just a regular training shoe. The reason for this is because you don't have an excessive amount of footsteps or slams. This shoe can handle it, and it will help kind of retrain and retool your running mechanics to be more efficient. However, if you are training over 5 miles, then that's when I would go to a more specific running shoe. Also, talking about shoes in general, if you have a shoe that has a high, very cushioned foot, or also a high arch, it could be messing up your foot mechanics and actually deactivating your feet. So a problem that I commonly see with people that wear a lot of running shoes or things like hiking shoes, that sort of nature, is that one, they have a heel elevation and have a very hard time pulling their toes back towards their knees because they're always in this flexed position. Also, the shoe itself is created with an arch, so a lot of people end up having high arches. This causes a problem because the high arch means that the foot has now almost petrified in this position, which no longer allows it to work and grab as much as it used to. So training back or transitioning back to a lower soled shoe closer to the floor is going to be optimal for foot health as well as training and overall just a better lower body support while training. Now again, if you're doing powerlifting or Olympic lifting, that's when a shoe like this Olympic lifting shoe, will come into play. But for the general population or most people that I recommend, it's going to be a lower version of a shoe. So I typically like to train in like my Metcons, I train in Converse, Chuck Taylors, that sort of stuff, so I'm very close to the floor and have very little shoe support. That again also helps me because it starts to enable my foot to work like it is intended to work. By supporting, giving too much cushion, it takes your feet away from the floor and makes the foot not actually function as optimally as it should. So if you really want to get a lot out of your training, transition to something small. If you don't already have training shoes like Nike Frees, Metcons, Reebok Nanos, anything like that, you can get away with training in things like Converse, Chuck Taylors, Toms. I've even trained in Toms before, the very flat shoe. Women, I say ballet slippers, things like that are going to be better for you in the overall training aspect, as well as getting a lot more out of your training and maintaining optimal foot health. The other thing is if you are currently someone that experiences high arches or flat feet, start walking around barefoot more often or in a more minimal style shoe, starting to build up time under duration with that style of shoe or non-shoe, and that will help restructure the foot and start to either engage the muscles in the foot to where it reactivates the arch in your foot because you're constantly moving, grabbing, and walking in either a barefoot, or it's going to help start flattening the arch a little bit to allow you to be in a more natural position and engage again your feet. So if you're wearing a shoe that has a high arch, over supported, you're actually hindering your ankles, your feet, and overall ability to stabilize, support, and strengthen your lower body from the feet up. All right, guys, so if you have any questions, feel free to comment below and I'll help answer them. But hopefully this kind of helps you with the idea of what you need to be looking for when it comes to shoes, when it comes to your training.